The morning sun spilled into Mia's small room, casting soft shadows against the walls as she tried on yet another outfit. Her bed was covered with clothes, remnants of an hour-long decision-making process. After finishing college, Mia felt restless, eager to find her place in the world, and today marked the beginning of that search. It had been months since she had applied to various shops and restaurants around town, and a few had finally responded. She felt a blend of excitement and trepidation. Each place offered something different, but the restaurant in the heart of downtown seemed the most intriguing. They had offered her a position overseeing the waitstaff, a role that made her feel important, more than just another face delivering plates to tables. The idea appealed to her. She'd have a chance to prove herself, maybe even work her way up to something better. "Are you ready?" Her father, Denver, called from downstairs, his voice echoing up the staircase. Denver was her rock, especially in the last few years. Mia's mother, Jenny, had been admitted to an asylum 2 years ago due to a mysterious mental illness, leaving Mia and her father to navigate life together. They visited Jenny regularly, though each visit felt like facing a storm of emotions. Mia missed her mother terribly, and the loss often left her feeling hollow, as though something essential was always just out of reach. "I'll be down in a second," Mia responded, pulling on her shoes. Taking a last glance in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "You've got this." She grabbed her bag, dashed downstairs, and gave her father a quick smile. "Good luck, Mia," Denver said, his eyes warm with pride. Mia managed a nod, her mind already racing with anticipation and questions about what this new job would bring. The restaurant was lively and bustling by the time Mia arrived. It was larger than she had anticipated, with polished tables, low lighting, and an air of refinement that made her stand a little taller. The manager, a tall, brisk woman named Clara, greeted her at the door and offered a quick tour of the place, pointing out the key areas she'd need to know. Clara led her to a table near the kitchen doors. "You'll oversee the waitstaff from here," she explained. "Make sure they're doing their jobs, and step in if any issues arise. You're not here to wait tables, though. Remember that." Mia took it all in, feeling slightly overwhelmed but ready to jump in. The waitstaff nodded as she was introduced to them, and before long, her first day officially began. As she was organizing schedules and observing the team, an unusual sight caught her eye. A figure stepped through the restaurant doors. A woman, old and mysterious, with a crooked back and dressed in an array of mismatched fabrics. Her gaze was intense, sharp eyes that seemed to see more than they should. The woman walked past the tables without glancing at any of the waitstaff, her gaze locked on Mia. "You, dear," she said, her voice soft but unmistakably commanding. "Take my order." Mia glanced around, realizing the woman was speaking to her. Remembering Clara's instructions, she hesitated. Technically, this wasn't her role, but something in the woman's eyes made it hard to refuse. Ignoring her apprehension, Mia approached her and managed a polite smile. "Sure, ma'am. What would you like?" The woman grinned, an unsettling expression that left Mia feeling strangely exposed. "Italian. Something delicious," she replied simply, leaning back in her chair. Mia nodded and jotted down the order, about to turn back when the woman's voice drifted through the hum of the restaurant. "You are special, my dear." The words hung in the air, an odd chill sweeping over Mia. She frowned, looking back at the woman. "What do you mean?" But the woman only offered a cryptic smile and lowered her gaze, reaching for her phone. Mia waited for a moment, half expecting more, but the woman said nothing else, lost in her own world. Pushing down her unease, Mia returned to her duties, although the woman's comment lingered in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the woman, something both familiar and foreign. The days went by, and Mia adjusted quickly to her new role. She learned to handle small crises, from the cook's bad temper to spilled drinks and a few disgruntled customers. The team began to respect her, and she found herself enjoying the rush of the restaurant's pace. Yet every few days, the strange woman would return, slipping in and finding her way to the same table near the back. Each time she called Mia over, ordering a different dish, always Italian. Mia noticed how the woman never engaged with the other staff, only speaking to her. It was as if she saw something in Mia that no one else could. One afternoon, when the restaurant was relatively quiet, Mia took a chance to ask the woman a question that had been gnawing at her. "I've seen you here a lot lately," she ventured. "Do you come often to this part of town?" The woman looked up, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "I go wherever I'm needed, dear, and I suppose I'm needed here for now." Mia tilted her head, puzzled. "Needed? For what?" The woman shrugged, offering nothing more. "You'll see soon enough." Every interaction with the woman seemed to lead to more questions than answers, but despite her growing sense of unease, Mia found herself strangely drawn to her. There was something captivating about her, a feeling that defied logic or explanation. One evening, just before closing time, the woman spoke again, her tone more serious than before. "Tell me, Mia, do you believe in things unseen?" Mia hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Growing up, her mother had often shared old tales of spirits and energies that moved unseen through the world. Mia had dismissed them as mere stories, but something in the woman's eyes made her doubt her own certainty. "I don't know," Mia admitted quietly. "Maybe." The woman's expression softened, a look of satisfaction passing over her face. "It's good to keep an open mind," she replied, "especially in a place like this." "Why?" Mia couldn't resist asking. "What do you mean by a place like this?" The woman's smile returned, mysterious as always. "Some places have a history, layers of memories, old energies. This restaurant has seen many things, dear. Some of those things linger." The words sent a shiver through Mia, though she couldn't explain why. She glanced around the room, suddenly aware of its dim corners and shadowed walls. It was strange to think of a place having a memory, of events leaving their mark on the very air. "Is that why you come here?" Mia asked, her curiosity outweighing her unease. The woman took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving Mia's. "I come here for you," she said simply. The answer was both chilling and comforting, a strange contradiction that left Mia at a loss for words. She looked at the woman, searching for some hint of explanation, but the woman had already turned her gaze back to her cup, as if the conversation were over. Days turned into weeks, and the woman's visits became a fixture of Mia's routine. The two of them shared little more than brief conversations, but Mia found herself looking forward to these exchanges, to the strange wisdom the woman offered in fragments. Their relationship was unconventional, yet there was a bond between them that Mia couldn't deny. But one night, after another quiet conversation with the woman, Mia felt an odd sensation on her walk home, a feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the streetlights cast an eerie glow, making the familiar path feel distorted. Her father had always told her not to walk alone at night, but tonight the advice seemed more pressing than ever. She quickened her pace, her senses alert, as if expecting someone to step out from the darkness. Yet no one came. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the soft rustle of leaves against the pavement. By the time she reached home, her father was already asleep. Mia went to her room and sat by her window, looking out into the night. Her mind was filled with questions. her pulse racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was left wondering about the strange woman who had woven herself into Mia's new life. And for the first time, Mia sensed that her world was on the edge of something unknown, as if a door had been opened that she could never close. Her journey had only just begun. Days continued to pass, and the woman's presence in Mia's life grew stronger. Her visits to the restaurant were now a regular occurrence, and each time they spoke, the woman's words became more mysterious. It was as if she knew something about Mia that Mia didn't know herself. Then one evening, after closing, the woman finally revealed what she had been hinting at all along. "You have a gift, Mia," she said, her voice low and intent. "There's something in you waiting to be awakened, a power you've barely begun to feel." Mia was taken aback. "A power?" she asked, not sure if she believed her. "What do you mean?" "Come with me," the woman replied, her eyes glinting with an intensity Mia had never seen. Before she could think to question it, Mia found herself agreeing, curiosity driving her more than caution. They walked out of town and into the thick woods, the trees towering around them like dark, silent guardians. Mia felt a strange pull, as though the forest itself were leading her deeper into something hidden, something ancient. Once they were far into the forest, the woman stopped. "Watch," she said simply, before stepping back and transforming in a way that left Mia speechless. The woman's movements became impossibly quick, darting between trees and leaping higher than any person could. She moved with the power and grace of a predator, her form almost blending into the shadows. Then she crouched low and, with a swift motion, bit into a fallen branch, snapping it with a force that felt unnatural. Her eyes gleamed as she looked at Mia, a wildness there that Mia found both terrifying and strangely appealing. "These are only some of the abilities I have," the woman said, her voice still calm despite the display of power. "I wasn't born with them. I gained them through rituals. They made me stronger, faster, more alive than I ever was." Mia felt her pulse quicken. She had never imagined anything like this was possible, and the idea of having such strength and speed was exciting. But at the same time, a small voice in her mind warned her to be careful. "Could I have these powers too?" Mia asked, unable to hide her fascination. The woman's face softened, her smile almost warm. "Yes, Mia. With the right rituals, you could have all this and more. Think about what you could become." Mia considered it, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. She imagined herself with those powers, able to move through the world as something more than human. But doubts crept in too, nagging questions about what the rituals might require. "I don't know," Mia said finally. "It sounds amazing, but I'm not sure it's right for me." The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "It's a big decision," she agreed. "But remember, the offer stands. You'll know where to find me if you change your mind." Mia thanked her and walked back home, her thoughts swirling. That night, as she lay in bed, her dreams took a strange turn. She saw herself in the forest with the woman, undergoing the rituals and feeling the power rushing through her body. She leapt high, faster and stronger than she ever imagined, a wild joy filling her. But just as she reached out to touch a shadow, she woke up, her room quiet and still. It had only been a dream, but the feeling lingered. Mia lay there, wondering if it was a sign or a warning. The next morning, Mia arrived at the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room as she anticipated seeing the mysterious woman. For days now, that woman had been her constant visitor, filling her life with new possibilities, and Mia had grown used to her daily appearance. But today, as the minutes turned into hours, the woman never appeared. Mia waited, checking the door each time it swung open. But the familiar figure didn't step in. At first, Mia dismissed it, thinking perhaps the woman was simply busy. But when the woman didn't come the next day, or the day after that, a strange feeling crept over Mia. The woman had become such an integral part of her thoughts that her sudden absence was unsettling. Mia decided to call, dialing the woman's number as she sat on her break in the quiet corner of the restaurant. The phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. As days passed, Mia's curiosity turned into frustration. Now that she was convinced of the powers and the life they might offer, the woman was nowhere to be found. And Mia was starting to feel restless without the answers she'd come to expect. One afternoon, as she was working, a particularly rude customer stormed into the restaurant. He was loud and irritable, unhappy with everything from the seating to the menu. When Mia tried to calm him, the man became furious, accusing her of wasting his time and demanding better service. Before she knew it, he'd snatched up a bottle and hurled it in her direction. Mia raised her hands, but the glass smashed nearby, spraying shards everywhere. She managed to avoid any serious injury, but her face flushed with embarrassment and anger as the customer stormed out without apology. Mia's frustration boiled over. If she had powers, if she was stronger, like the woman had promised, she could have put the customer in his place. Instead, she was just Mia, the in-charge but helpless to act. As she cleaned up the mess, she couldn't shake the thought. If only she had those abilities, she would have given him a lesson he'd never forget. That night, Mia drifted into a restless sleep, her mind filled with thoughts of the woman and the strange power she'd offered. And then, in her dream, Mia saw herself walking into the same dark forest. The trees seemed denser, the night shadows deeper. Ahead of her, she spotted the woman, surrounded by others, men and women she didn't recognize, all standing in a circle, chanting. The air thrummed with energy as they performed a ritual, and Mia felt an almost magnetic pull toward them. Just as she was about to reach them, she woke up, her mind spinning. The dream was so vivid that it felt almost real. But more than anything, Mia was left with an overwhelming desire for that power. Her regular life suddenly felt limited and helpless in comparison. As Mia sat in bed, something clicked in her memory. The forest in her dream, the clearing where the ritual took place, was a place she'd seen before. It was the very same spot where the woman had taken her that night, when she'd first shown Mia her powers. Mia felt a sudden resolve build within her. If the woman wouldn't come to her, she would go back to the forest herself. Later that night, while the world slept, Mia quietly slipped out of her house. She made her way through the silent streets, her footsteps soft against the pavement as she ventured toward the forest. She reached the tree line, the moon casting faint light over her path, and stepped into the dense shadows. After some time, she found the clearing, exactly as she remembered it. The tall trees circled the open area, and the ground was carpeted with fallen leaves and thick moss. Mia looked around, hoping to find some sign of the woman, but the clearing was empty. Disappointed but not defeated, Mia continued searching, her eyes scanning the ground for any clue. Then, beneath a thick patch of leaves, her hand brushed against something rough. She pulled it out and realized it was a small leather-bound book. Curious, she opened it, the pages yellowed with age, but the writing still legible. As she flipped through, she noticed that it detailed rituals and descriptions of a kind she had never seen before. Reading further, Mia's hands grew tense as she realized what the rituals were for. They described a transformation, something beyond ordinary power. According to the book, one could gain abilities beyond imagination, speed, strength, heightened senses, but it came at a price. She read on, her eyes widening as the truth became clear. The transformation wasn't just about power, it was a complete change. The rituals were meant to turn a person into something else entirely. The process wasn't a simple ritual, but a way to become a werewolf shifter. The book explained that the change required a bite from a werewolf, one that would have to be near the neck. If left untreated, the wound would allow the transformation to begin, setting the person on a path to becoming a werewolf. Mia felt a chill run down her spine as she read. Werewolves weren't just creatures of legend. They were real, and the woman who had befriended her was one of them. Mia's first reaction was disbelief mixed with fear. She had wanted power. Yes, but this? Becoming a werewolf was something beyond what she had envisioned. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and far more intense than anything she had imagined. A part of her felt drawn to it, though. In her mind, she pictured herself with the strength and speed the woman had displayed, able to face any challenge without fear. The thought of having that kind of power was enticing, but she also knew it came with a cost. A werewolf's life would be filled with its own challenges, and she would forever be something other than human. As Mia's fingers lingered on the book's pages, a strange mix of emotions filled her. She was torn between the life she knew and the life the woman had shown her, a life where she could be more than just a helpless girl at a restaurant. She closed the book, taking a deep breath to steady herself. In that moment, Mia knew one thing for sure. She could never go back to her old life. The knowledge she had gained, the glimpse into a world beyond her own, had left a mark on her that wouldn't fade. She could either abandon the idea of power and return to the life she'd always known, or she could embrace the unknown with all its dangers and promises of strength. Mia stood there in the forest, the book clutched tightly in her hands, her mind racing with the decision before her. She wasn't ready to decide, not yet, but she knew she couldn't stay away forever. The call of power, the promise of a life beyond what she'd always known, was too strong to ignore. With the first light of dawn breaking through the trees, Mia made her way back home, her thoughts still swirling. The decision lay before her, and though she wasn't ready yet, she felt the pull of the choice waiting for her. Would she dare to step into a world where she could wield power beyond human limits, or would she turn away, leaving the life she had always known untouched? For now, Mia knew she would need time to decide, but one thing was clear. Her life had already changed, and there was no turning back from what she had seen. Mia stood in the dark forest, the mysterious book tucked under her arm, feeling the weight of everything she had just discovered. Her mind spun with thoughts of werewolves, hidden rituals, and the strange woman who had disappeared from her life just as abruptly as she had entered it. She decided it was time to leave. The forest held too many secrets, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to uncover them all. But as soon as Mia turned to leave, a strange rustling sound echoed through the trees, making her freeze. At first, it was just a faint noise, like leaves brushing against each other. But then it grew louder, turning into a haunting, unmistakable howl. Mia's skin prickled, and a shiver crept over her. It sounded like a wolf, but deeper, more chilling. Something about it told her this wasn't a normal animal. Without another thought, Mia started to run. She moved as fast as she could, her footsteps quick on the uneven ground as she tried to navigate her way out of the dark forest. But then, in the corner of her eye, she saw something flash past her. A creature, swift and silent, barely visible but close enough to make her stop. She had no time to see it clearly, but its speed, its dark form darting between the trees, sent her mind racing. Mia didn't wait to find out what it was. She ran even faster, but her thoughts were jumbled. She'd come here searching for answers, but now all she wanted was to escape. The forest felt alive, as if it held secrets she wasn't meant to uncover. Just as she thought she might be getting closer to the edge of the woods, something heavy struck her from behind, knocking her to the ground. The impact was hard, and everything went dark. When Mia opened her eyes, she found herself lying on the forest floor. She wasn't sure how long she'd been there, but the morning sunlight was now filtering weakly through the canopy above. She pushed herself up, her head spinning, and as she stood, she noticed a strange sensation near her neck. A sharp, throbbing pain pulsed just below her jaw. Reaching up, her fingers brushed against two small puncture wounds. She touched them gingerly, realizing that something, or someone, had bitten her. Fear surged through her as she staggered to her feet, feeling a wave of dizziness. She couldn't explain what had happened or why she'd been left there. Wounded, but alive. All she knew was that she needed to get home, away from this forest and whatever creatures lurked in its shadows. When she finally reached her house, she locked herself in her room, exhaustion pressing down on her. She leaned against the mirror, studying her reflection. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide, but otherwise she looked just like herself. There were no signs of change, no hints of the strange powers she'd expected. She was just Mia. For the next 2 days, she waited, keeping to her room, half expecting some drastic transformation to occur. But nothing happened. Her reflection stayed the same, and apart from a slight soreness in her neck, she felt normal. No claws, no glowing eyes, no sudden strength or speed. Eventually, Mia began to relax, dismissing the bite as a strange and painful accident. Whatever had happened in the forest seemed to have left no lasting impact. Finally, deciding to put the entire experience behind her, Mia returned to her job at the restaurant. She stepped inside, hoping the familiar routine would help her forget about the forest and the bite. As she walked in, Mia's eyes fell on the far corner booth, the one where the woman always sat. And there she was, sitting as if she'd never been away, gazing out the window, calm and collected. Mia's heart skipped, a mixture of excitement and anger bubbling up within her. She walked over, determined to get answers. "You stopped coming," Mia began, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "I've been waiting for days. Where were you?" The woman turned her head, her expression as smooth and unreadable as ever. "I was occupied with other matters, Mia," she said, as though her absence was of no consequence. Her calm tone only irritated Mia more. "I want those powers," Mia said, her frustration spilling over. "I've thought about it, and I want to know everything." She hesitated, but then told the woman about her dreams, the forest, the rituals, and even the bite. She described the strange creature she'd seen, and the feeling that she was being watched, hunted. The woman listened in silence, her face barely changing. But as Mia mentioned the bite, a slow, knowing smile appeared on her lips. "You are special, Mia," the woman said softly, her eyes glinting with a strange light. Her words were like an answer and a mystery all at once. Mia frowned, caught between wanting to know more and feeling increasingly wary. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "Why did you bring me into this? And what will happen to me now?" The woman's gaze drifted, and she stood up slowly. "I need to go," she said abruptly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "What?" Mia's frustration returned. "No, you can't just leave. You owe me an explanation." But the woman simply turned and walked toward the restroom without another word. Determined not to lose her again, Mia followed, her footsteps quickening as she reached the restroom door. She pushed it open, expecting to find the woman inside, but when she entered, the restroom was empty. There was no sign of the woman anywhere. Mia searched each stall, her irritation growing with every second, but it was as if the woman had vanished into thin air. Feeling a sense of defeat, Mia left the restroom, scanning the restaurant in hopes that the woman might have doubled back, but the booth was empty. The mysterious woman was gone, leaving Mia with more questions than ever. The next day, Mia noticed a striking young man stepping into the restaurant, his confident stride catching everyone's attention. With his sharp features, piercing blue eyes, and tailored clothes, he looked like he had stepped out of a dream. Her boss quickly called her over.
"Mia," he said, whispering excitedly, "attend to that young man. He's rich, so make sure he has everything he needs."
Mia glanced over at the young man, feeling both nervous and intrigued. She approached, trying to maintain a professional smile, her stomach fluttering. "Hi, I'm Mia. How can I help you today?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The man gave her a charming smile.
"Thanks, Mia. I'm Chris. Just looking for a quiet place to unwind with some coffee,"
he said, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than expected. Their conversation started simply, but something about Chris was magnetic. In the next few visits, Chris would ask Mia about herself, teasing out her laughter, making her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. He had an easy charm that made Mia feel light and free from all the mysteries and worries of recent weeks. Each conversation deepened her fondness for him, and her heart grew warm with a sense of hope. She felt drawn to him, but as much as she wanted to tell him, she held back. He was clearly from a world she couldn't imagine, a rich, carefree life, while she was just a waitress from a simple background. Still, her feelings grew. One night, as Mia was walking home after her shift, she saw Chris standing in the shadows of a quiet alley with another woman. Her steps slowed as she recognized him, her stomach dropping. She felt her cheeks burn as she saw them together, the woman's arms around him, their faces close. She turned away, wanting to disappear, but couldn't help glancing back. Her chest tightened as she realized they were kissing. She tried to hold herself together, lowering her gaze as she hurried away, every step echoing her confusion and hurt. The next day, Chris came to the restaurant, cheerful as usual, as if nothing had happened. To Mia's shock, he walked up to her with that familiar smile and asked her to dance.
"Come on, Mia, let's have some fun. Just one dance?"
he coaxed, reaching out his hand. Mia was stunned. The image of Chris kissing that girl was still fresh in her mind. Why would he ask her to dance after what she had seen? But something in his smile and his soft words made her agree, against her better judgment. She let him take her hand, and they swayed together to the soft music playing in the background. As they danced, she tried to enjoy the moment, to lose herself in his gaze. For a moment, she felt almost special, but when the owner glanced sharply at her, reminding her she was on duty, Mia stepped back reluctantly, murmuring, "I'd better get back to work." Before leaving, she asked Chris if he would meet her the next morning for coffee. He agreed, leaning in to kiss her cheek softly before walking away. The small kiss left her blushing, but beneath it, her mind spun with questions about the other girl she'd seen with him. She tried to brush it off, clinging to the hope that maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. The following morning, Mia was buzzing with excitement as she made her way to the coffee shop, thinking of what to say when she saw him. But when she arrived, Chris was nowhere to be seen. After waiting for some time, Mia turned to leave, feeling disappointed and embarrassed. She walked slowly, lost in thought, when she caught sight of him down the street. Her heart skipped, but the excitement quickly faded as she realized he was with another woman. This time, there was no mistaking it. She watched as Chris kissed the girl, openly, in broad daylight, and the casual way he did it made her stomach churn. He looked up, meeting Mia's gaze briefly, but instead of stopping, he turned back to the woman, continuing as if Mia didn't matter. Pain, anger, and confusion surged within her, a raw wave that wouldn't be held back. "Chris!" she shouted, unable to control herself. She could feel the anger boiling up inside her, making her feel strange and powerful all at once. Her vision blurred, her breath quickened, and her muscles tightened, as if her entire body were shifting. Chris looked at her briefly with an annoyed smirk, then turned his attention back to the girl. That smirk cut through her like a knife, and she let out a sharp scream, her body trembling as strange sensations took over. Her skin felt like it was stretching, her teeth seemed to ache, and her senses heightened. She fought to calm herself, feeling a rush of energy that was foreign and frightening. With a final effort, she managed to steady herself, closing her eyes and forcing herself to take deep breaths. When she opened them, everything was normal again. The changes faded, but a faint, restless energy lingered beneath her skin. She was shaken, yet her anger had turned into something else, a desire for revenge. When Mia returned home, a storm of thoughts swirled inside her. She had felt her body shift into something beyond human that morning. Though she was terrified by it, a new truth became clear. She had powers, the kind that weren't supposed to belong to her. This strange strength had felt like a curse, and yet, in that one terrifying moment, she had felt alive. That night, Mia's mind raced. She knew she had to test her new form, to embrace this side of herself that had been awakened. With Chris's betrayal still fresh in her mind, she felt only one urge: revenge. When the moon rose, she slipped out of her house, making her way to the dark grove near Chris's home. She hid in the shadows of the towering trees, scanning for any movement around his home, her senses sharpened, her muscles coiled in anticipation. But Chris didn't come. As she lingered there, an eerie silence blanketed the woods. Suddenly, a low, echoing howl pierced the quiet, chilling her to the bone. She froze, her ears picking up the sound of paws moving quickly toward her. And then, through the trees, a huge, dark wolf, with eyes gleaming like coals, appeared, barreling toward her. Before she could think, something primal took over. A burning sensation flooded through her body, and she felt her bones crack and reshape, her muscles tightening with strange power. She could see her own claws lengthening, her senses growing keener. She was transforming, and it was happening in mere moments. Mia, now a powerful werewolf, lunged at the beast, claws flashing, fangs bared. The other wolf staggered, clearly not expecting her strength, and soon it fled into the depths of the forest, leaving her victorious. But Mia's fury wasn't satisfied. She had come here for revenge, and her thirst had only grown. The smell of human flesh reached her heightened senses, and she caught sight of an old man wandering near the edge of the woods. Her mind clouded, instincts taking over. She leapt forward, grabbing him with her powerful jaws and claws, unable to stop herself. The old man's terrified cries only fueled her hunger. She didn't even recognize herself as she sank her teeth in. But suddenly, the distant wail of police sirens sliced through the night. She whipped around, wild and out of control, before tearing off into the forest. She crashed through the undergrowth, still in her monstrous form, unable to calm herself. As she roamed deeper into the woods, every creature she encountered, squirrels, rabbits, even the occasional deer, felt her fury. She attacked whatever crossed her path until, at last, she collapsed from exhaustion as dawn broke. When the sun rose, Mia awoke, lying in the dirt, her human form restored but covered in scratches and blood. She staggered to her feet, feeling both exhausted and horrified by the night's events. She went straight home, her mind reeling. In her bathroom, she scrubbed herself clean, hoping the scalding water would erase the guilt, but the dark memories stayed. That night, As hunger gnawed at her, she tried to eat regular food, but her stomach twisted in disgust. She now craved something different, something alive. Driven by her new instincts, she headed back to the woods and hunted down a small animal, feeding in the quiet shadows until she regained control, shifting back into her human form. She found she could shift at will now, this strange new power both a blessing and a curse. Back at home, Mia received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The voice on the line informed her that Chris had been in an accident and wanted to see her. She felt a strange mixture of worry and bitterness as she rushed to the hospital. Chris lay on the hospital bed, pale and weak. His leg was bandaged, and his arm was in a sling, but he smiled when he saw her, his eyes brightening.
"I was on my way to meet you," he began. "I'd promised, remember? But this car came out of nowhere. The driver, she was a woman. I swear she hit me on purpose."
Mia's heart clenched as Chris described the driver's appearance. It matched the woman she'd seen him with before. Suspicion sparked in her mind, and she asked him about that night she saw him with another woman. Chris looked confused, then shook his head firmly. "That wasn't me, Mia. You must have seen someone else. Why would I kiss anyone else when I—" He hesitated. "When I care about you?" Mia's confusion deepened. All along, she'd thought Chris had betrayed her, but now a new picture was forming in her mind. Maybe that woman had been manipulating things from the start, trying to drive them apart. Her anger turned from Chris to this mysterious woman who had interfered in her life. Leaning close, Mia kissed Chris on the cheek, whispering, "Rest. I'll be back soon." Leaving the hospital, she returned to the forest, determined to find the woman and demand answers. She could feel her werewolf instincts rising within her as she moved through the trees, every sense sharp and alert. This time, however, she wasn't alone. The woman was waiting for her, standing tall and fearless in the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here," the woman said coldly, her voice cutting through the silence. "You aren't meant to love a human." Mia's fists clenched, rage flooding through her. "You tried to destroy everything for me. You set this all up just to ruin my life." The woman laughed, her eyes gleaming with a cruel amusement. "You don't understand, do you? You're cursed, Mia. This power isn't a gift, it's a trap. You were never meant to lead a normal life, and you certainly aren't meant to be with him." Something inside Mia snapped. She transformed, her powerful wolf form taking over, and lunged at the woman. But the woman barely flinched, matching Mia's strength with her own supernatural abilities. They clashed, Mia's fury driving her forward, but the woman's strength was overwhelming. Mia found herself knocked to the ground, breathless and defeated. The woman stood over her, calm and unbothered, and leaned down, her face close to Mia's. "Stay away from Chris," she warned, her voice laced with venom. "He doesn't belong in our world, and neither do you anymore if you can't let go." As Mia lay there, struggling to breathe, she began to understand. This power she held was indeed more curse than gift. It had already cost her so much, and now it threatened to destroy her only hope for love. The woman vanished into the night, leaving Mia alone in the dirt, realizing that her life had changed forever. Mia spent days battling the primal urge within her. She'd promised herself she wouldn't transform again. She'd stay human, live as normal a life as she could. But each night, the cravings crept in, the hunger stirring restlessly, gnawing at her until she could almost feel her bones begin to shift, her claws trying to emerge. Every instinct in her body screamed to let go, to hunt, to feed. Then came a day that broke the fragile peace she had clung to. Chris had invited her over to meet his mother, an invitation Mia had been eagerly anticipating. Just as they approached his house, Mia froze. Standing in the living room, chatting with Chris's mother, was the woman from the restaurant. Her heart stammered as she recognized the familiar, unsettling face. Mia swallowed, masking her shock. Who is she? She asked, her voice nearly cracking. Chris smiled. Oh, that's my mother's new friend. They met recently and really hit it off. At that moment, the woman looked over and, with a sly smile, said, What a lovely surprise, Mia. My dear friend. Chris glanced back and forth between them, curious. So, you two know each other? Yes, the woman replied smoothly, her gaze fixed on Mia. Very well indeed. Mia forced a smile, desperately trying to hide her unease. The woman's presence unsettled her, but she was relieved that nothing was said to reveal her secret. When she returned home, she breathed a sigh of relief, silently thanking whatever powers might be that, for now, everything seemed fine. But that night, sleep eluded her as her body writhed with the painful, insatiable hunger. The full moon bathed her room in a pale glow, intensifying her urges. She tossed and turned, feeling her senses sharpen and her muscles tingle. Her thoughts became clouded, her body preparing to transform. Realizing she couldn't control it, Mia slipped out of her house and sprinted into the dark forest, allowing the change to come over her fully. In her werewolf form, she raced through the undergrowth, her senses alive, hunting whatever crossed her path. She devoured her prey, her hunger seeming to quiet with each bite. After a long hunt, she let herself revert to her human form, breathing heavily, the night air chilling her skin. But then, a sound nearby stopped her in her tracks. Turning slowly, she saw two figures standing in the shadows. Her heart dropped as Chris stepped into the moonlight, a look of horror and disbelief etched across his face. Beside him stood the woman, who smiled with twisted satisfaction. So, Chris said in a shaking voice, you're a werewolf. Mia tried to speak, but no words would come. Chris looked at her as though she were a stranger, stepping back in fear. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in shock. The woman beside him only laughed, watching Mia's pain with cold satisfaction. Overcome, Mia sank to the ground, unable to hold back her tears. She felt the truth hit her hard. She had become a monster. No matter how she fought, no matter how she tried to control it, the beast inside her was taking over. Her chance at love, at a normal life, was shattered. Stumbling to her feet, she ran deeper into the forest, determined to live out her days in the shadows as the beast she had become. The pain of losing Chris felt like a wound that would never heal, but at least, she thought, she could do no more harm to those she loved. Days passed, and Mia, now fully embracing her werewolf form, roamed the forest like a ghost. The forest creatures were no longer enough to satisfy her wild hunger. With each hunt, she craved more. Her instincts drove her to hunt larger prey, and soon she found herself stalking humans who wandered too close to the forest's edge. Each hunt pulled her deeper into the darkness, her humanity slipping further away, replaced by the savage beast she had feared all along. It was a quiet night as Mia prowled the edge of the forest, her senses alert to any movement. Her werewolf instincts were fully in control, and the thrill of the hunt drove her forward. As she scanned the streets near the forest, she spotted a figure walking alone. She crouched low, every muscle tense as she moved in closer, preparing to attack. But as she sprang forward, her sharp claws ready to strike, the man didn't flinch. He simply stood there, meeting her gaze with a calm acceptance that caught her off guard. In that moment, her focus sharpened, and a terrible realization dawned on her. It was Chris. She froze, her claws hovering over his chest, unable to finish what she'd started. Chris looked up at her, his eyes soft, filled with a sadness that tore at her heart.
Mia, Why did you stop?
He asked quietly. Overwhelmed, Mia stepped back, horrified by her own actions. She'd been ready to end him, ready to destroy the person she loved. She felt a wave of shame and disgust wash over her as she stood, trembling. Chris seemed almost relieved, as if he'd come there looking for this, but he showed no fear.
I don't want this life anymore,
he said, his voice low but steady.
Go ahead.
Mia's werewolf instincts began to fade as she gazed at him. Slowly, she transformed back into her human form, her expression raw with emotion. She whispered, "Why?" Chris took a deep breath.
Mia, I missed you every single moment since you left. At first, I couldn't accept what you are. It terrified me. I thought I'd lost you forever. But then I realized I was wrong.
He paused, his voice filled with sincerity.
I love you, Mia. It doesn't matter what you are. You're still you.
Mia's heart swelled with hope as she looked into his eyes, feeling the truth in his words. She stepped forward, feeling a deep longing pull her closer to him. Without another word, she leaned in and kissed him softly, feeling the warmth and the love that had brought her back from the edge of darkness. She pulled back, her voice steady with a new resolve. I promise, Chris, I'll never be the werewolf again. They held each other, feeling the peace they'd both been searching for. Together, they returned home, leaving the darkness of the forest behind. From that night on, they built a life together, holding on to each other through every storm, every dark urge. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt like herself again, and with Chris by her side, she knew she had the strength to leave the beast behind for good.